This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. K-State row crop plant pathologist Rodrigo Onofre starts the show as he provides an update on soybean cyst nematodes, tar spot, and moldy corn. The show continues with K-State Extension swine specialist Mike Tokach as he highlights the 2025 K-State Swine Day, along with the research and innovations happening in the swine industry. Director of the K-State Horticulture Research and Extension Center in Olathe, Cary Rivard, ends the show discussing their work in grafting tomatoes, agrivoltaics, and high tunnels. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Thursday show with a crop update from K-State row crop plant pathologist Rodrigo Onofre. Rodrigo, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me over, Shelby.
Rodrigo, first wanting to talk about soybeans, and what is something those crop growers might want to be keeping an eye out for?
Yeah, so we're at the harvest time, right? A lot of the producers have already harvested, and they're starting to think about soil testing for next year and getting ready for that. And at the same time, it's important to remember about soybean cyst nematode, right? It is the number one yield-limiting pathogen of soybeans, and it's distributed from several fields in the eastern and central part of Kansas. We're seeing high levels of it, especially on that central Kansas. In this kind of like transition over the last 10 years, the numbers in some of the fields there are skyrocketing. We have identified in 64 counties, right? So, which is more than 85% of our state soybean production, where it's coming from, right? So just keep that in mind. Soybean cyst nematode, as we know, it's a hard pathogen to identify in the field, right? Sometimes we don't even see it throughout the year, but our crop is between, let's say, 2 to 10 bushels lower than usual, then that's why it's important for us to understand the prevalence and distribution of the soybean cyst nematode in your field.
Why do we care about it now then if we're harvesting our soybeans?
Well, I think it's the best time to test for SCN. It's immediately after harvest, right? When soil conditions are favorable for sampling, you don't have the crop out there, you can just drive your ATV, or it's going to be easier for you to collect those samples and start planning for next year, either for a better variety or for some rotation, or even considering a seed treatment, depending on your levels.
Where can people send that sample?
So after you collect that sample, you can send it to us here at K-State to the Plant Diagnostic Lab. It is important to ship it overnight or as fast as possible, right? Avoid leaving it in bags in the sun. Those are nematodes, and they don't like hot, dry conditions, right? Make sure that you fill that form at the K-State Plant Diagnostic Lab at the K-State Plant Pathology Department. There is a link there. But it's, again, just send us a sample here to the K-State Plant Diagnostic Lab.
And another thing we're watching, however, this one in corn, late season tar spot.
So tar spot is not a new disease to us, right? It's been here for about 3 or 4 seasons now, so we're kind of like getting used to it, but especially on that northeast part of Kansas where it's more active lately. What we have seen is since it started in 2015 in Indiana, it has spread across all the corn region producing pretty quick. And here in Kansas, it's no different. We have seen over the years a move towards the western part of the state or central part of the state, right? Since tar spot is moving towards the western part of the state, central part of the state, right? We just confirmed a few weeks ago, October, in Lincoln and Smith counties. So we're kind of like getting towards the western part of the state, right? So that worries me a little bit just because those were late season detection identifications right there. But as we're getting close to the western part of the state, we're going to see more irrigation and potentially conditions for tar spot to be a threat to our corn production over there as well. So what producers should do now is still scouting for tar spot, but consider adding a hybrid that is resistant towards tar spot because if it ever shows up in your field, you already know a potential hybrid that you can quickly adapt or adopt it for the next years. Through resistance alone, we can see a yield benefit of up to 10 bushels better than a susceptible hybrid under high disease pressure, right? I always encourage our producers to start scouting early and start adopting hybrids that are resistant for it. What are we scouting for? Is that black lesion, looks like just a bug poop, but insect, but it doesn't rub off, right? It's across both sides of the leaves, and you can try to poke it around, and it's not going to rub off. You can always send me a picture too, or a sample to the K-State Plant Diagnostic Lab. Work with your local K-State extension agents, and they will make sure that you get a proper identification.
Rodrigo, you mentioned picking a hybrid that has some resistance to it, but is a crop rotation something that could also fix this issue?
Crop rotation, we don't have enough data suggesting that will reduce the pressure just because the neighboring fields will have so much tar spot in a certain year that can move in quick, right? The best way to defend against star spot is start picking a good hybrid. And then in season, if we have pressure, if disease is showing up, then we might consider some fungicides between that V10 to R3 growth stage.
And while we're thinking about corn, Rodrigo, what else are you keeping an eye on?
I think one thing to keep in mind is some of the ear modes that we might see this year. We are having above average precipitation, right, which is a really good thing. However, on the disease side of the equation, right, this brings humidity, this brings lower temperatures, and some of those pathogens are starting to create that moldy ear that sometimes, depending on the pathogen that you have, can lead to mycotoxins accumulation. So we have three common ear rots that we see in Kansas, which is Diplodocus ear rot, Gibberella ear rot, and Aspergillus ear rot. Because it's being such a overall wet ear, I don't expect that we'll see any Aspergillus being a problem. It's typically not a problem for us here in Kansas, but especially in a year like this. So Diplodocus ear rot and Gibberella ear rot, they're favorable by these more wet conditions, right? One thing to keep in mind is that Diplodocus ear rot does not produce mycotoxins, so properly identification is crucial for it, right? But Gibberella ear rot will produce mycotoxin, one that's called vomitoxin, and as well as Zane, as we call it, zearalenone toxin, and potentially other toxins too. And that's important because it can be toxic to animals. So if you're feeding that corn or silage too, we can see high levels causing some problems down the line.
Is that something that producers see on the husks, or you really have to see that ear of corn?
So you have to peel that husk and then look for some moldy ears, right? Some of that mycelium, and typically a Gibberella ear rot, the mycelium starts from the tip of the ear towards the bottom of it, and it's going to be whitish, pinkish mold that's growing on that ear.
Is this something then that's still okay for growers to get out of their field and they might just not get as good as price at the elevator?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Depending on your level of toxins, you can get a discount or even a truck being rejected at the elevator level, right? So definitely scouting or testing is important to understand. Now, for Gibberella ear rot, right, that vomitoxin, you can still blend if you have levels in your corn. However, Aspergillus, it's not, you can't blend Aspergillus ear rot.
When it comes to those ears of corn and then potentially having mold and producers then having to receive docs on that, is there anything else that might be happening?
Well, that's a good question, right? So it's kind of like all together. So, you're going to have potentially mycotoxins problems, but as well as a low test weight, which can affect your yield, right? I think those would be the two main things. Of course, low test weight can be caused by higher grain moisture, abiotic stress, or some late season leaf disease too, and below normal temperatures during that end of grain field.
And since we've had drying and then getting wet again and kind of going back and forth, any other concerns you see when it comes to ears of corn and corn harvest?
So I think one thing to keep in mind as we're getting close to harvest now too, some of these stalk rots that we might see it, either related to the fusarians that's out there, but as well for some of those in-season disease that cause that rapid senescence of our corn. And of course, that standability or that stalk strength is not great, right? So with all this rain and weather that we're getting now, we might see some fields just falling off too. And I have heard some reports, especially in the eastern part of the state, where growers are having some harvestability problems too.
Rodrigo, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you very much.
That was K-State row crop plant pathologist Rodrigo Onofre with a crop update for corn and soybeans. If you'd like to read more on these topics that he talked about, you can do so by checking out a few recent Agronomy E update articles. One of them is titled Protect Your Soybeans Next Year, Test for Soybean Cyst Nematode After Harvest. Within that article, you will also find the link for testing. If you want to find it by yourself, you can go online to www.plantpath.k-state.edu. I, of course, will be linking all this in today's show notes on agtoday.net. Another article is Corn Grain Quality, Moldy Ears, Low Test Weight, and Pre-Harvest Sprouting. There's also an article titled Late Season Tar Spot Update, Why Scouting Still Matters. You can find this and more also online by going to eagronomy.ksu.edu. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back.
You're tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing K-State's 2025 Swine Day with Extension Swine Specialist Mike Tokach. Mike, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
And Mike, can you tell me what attendees can expect from this year's event?
Well, Swine Day is always one of our biggest events of the year in the swine industry, and particularly here at K-State. We have attendees from all over the United States, swine nutritionists, producers, and other swine enthusiasts that want to learn about the latest research. We start the day off with a research update from the work that our group's been doing over the last year. And there we try to highlight some of our graduating students, and it's kind of a fast-paced session where we go through all the research that's been done here at K-State and what we think is some of the highlights that others have been working on around the country. And so with that would include we've been doing a lot of work with soybean meal, surveying soybean meal at different plants, trying to understand the nutritional factors, how much soybean meal we can use in diets. You know, that's probably a big area that our producers have a lot of interest in right now, because soybean meal has decreased in price, the increase both soy availability and decreased exports. And so that has been a high area of interest, is just how much soybean meal we can put in diets and what we should be looking for there. So we'll start the program off really talking about that. Then we have are highlighting some of the areas in terms of looking at how our graduate students work with feed budgeting, how simple you can make your diets, what they can do with reducing the amount of nutritional factors in the diet. We have one of our faculty that's done a lot of work with E. coli recently, and so we put up a new barn at that K-State where we can do E. coli research, and that's a disease that impacts our nursery pigs quite a bit in across the country, and we're looking at different ways to alter the diet, and then how should we clean the barns in terms of preparing them for the next group of pigs to minimize the impact that E. coli or other pathogens have from one group of pigs to the next. And so that, I think, is a really exciting area of research that will also be touched on in that morning session. And then we'll finish up with some of the latest research on minerals and work that was done and presented at our Midwest Animal Science meetings about iodine levels in the diet. And that's an area that we don't often think about because it's added at a very low inclusion rate, but we've seen some really nice improvements in growth rate with adding very high levels of iodine to the diet for a short period of time after weaning. And so we'll share that data with the producers. And then to update people on what's going on with our facilities, with our faculty, and some of the changes that are happening here at K-State. A lot of excitement around around campus, and so that'll kind of finish off our morning program.
Can you talk a little bit about what specifically is happening here at K-State in the swine industry?
Well, we've had some very exciting things happening just recently. 2 weekends ago, our swine team was awarded the Don Good Impact Award, which our Animal Science Department, in conjunction with our Livestock and Meat Industry Council, it's our alumni and donors that make a selection of a group that's made a major impact on the swine industry. And we were very fortunate that our Applied Swine Nutrition team was selected for that award. And we certainly want to continue to celebrate that at Swine Day with all of the people that have been very important to our industry, all the graduate students and the former members here at K-State that have went out and made a mark on the industry, not only in Kansas, around the United States, and around the world. We've also had some construction at our swine farm. We have a brand new nursery facility that we'll have pictures showing that at Swine Day. We've made some major construction events over the last few years with not only our nursery, our new farrowing house that we've had just a couple of years now, and then the construction here on campus, I think, will be very exciting for people coming back to visit and seeing what's going on with Call Hall and Weber Hall, where we're located, and the tie-ins with the Grain Industry Center and all of the new activity that's going on north of campus, as well as the brand new arena that we'll have the opportunity to work with.
And Mike, it looks like there's a trade show happening in the middle part of the day. What's going to be happening there?
Yes, the trade show is available actually before we start the program in the morning, all the way from the beginning until we finish up at about 3:30 in the afternoon. But the biggest time that people really spend their time at the trade show is around the lunch. And we always have, of course, a very good pork lunch at a Swine Day event. But we have about a 2-hour period there to allow all of the attendees to interact with the vendors, to learn about the latest things, again, going on in the industry with different products and different services that our allied industry is providing. We always have around 35 different vendors that will be set up at the Alumni Center to visit with the producers over that lunchtime period. Once we get back from the lunch, we start up that afternoon program about 1:30, and we're going to spend a lot of that time talking about some of the disease work that's happening in the vet school at K-State. Dr. Jordan Gephardt, one of our members of our Applied Swine Nutrition team that is housed in veterinary medicine, he's going to talk about African swine fever, the Japanese encephalitis virus, some of the things going on with Seneca Valley virus, other research that's being done here at K-State in both our BSL-3 facilities that we've had here for some time, and then also some of the things that we think is going to be going on with the new NBAth facility that is just up the street from us here in Manhattan. We also are going to touch on a little bit more on the research side in the afternoon, finishing up with some work on distiller's grains. We put out a new calculator that with some of the updated distiller's grains, and so one of our PhD students is going to talk about that, and then finish up that afternoon program on our research side with the sow area. And Joel DeRucci is going to talk about the work we've done in late gestation and with calcium gluconate, trying to reduce pre-weaning mortality and the stillbirth levels in sows. One of the highlights of the day always for us is to bring back one of our graduates to talk about what's going on in their part of the world, and that's no different this year. We have Dr. Arkin Wu, who is based in China, works with the Pipestone Systems, who have major operations here in the U.S., but they also have operations in China. And Arkin graduated here about 7 or 8 years ago now, but he has been very active in the Chinese swine industry, and he's going to talk about some of the high-rise pig farms that they have in China, and then some of the trends that are going on in their industry, some of the things that are going on with expansion, with downsizing of some of the smaller farms, and just giving an update on where the disease status is. And I think, with the importance of the Chinese swine industry in the world, I think it's going to be very important for our producers to be watching what's happening there. Anybody that isn't familiar, China has about 50% of all the pigs in the world. And so anytime something happens in the Chinese industry, it sends reverberations around the world.
Mike, you mentioned the new calculator that your team is going to be releasing. What about things like this or other resources for people who maybe aren't attending the event? Where can they go find those?
Well, our website, ksuswine.org, is an excellent resource where you can find not only the calculator, you can find a link to the Swine Day registration. And I do want to remind producers that and other attendees that you want to pre-register in advance. The attendance fee is only $25 if it's pre-registered by November 12th. And the fee, you can show up at the day of the event, but it will cost you a little bit more if you don't pre-register. And the main reason we want pre-registration, of course, is to understand how many people we're going to have for the lunch and to prepare for that.
What does the scope of this event look like?
We normally have anywhere between 400 and 550 attendees at Swine Day, and the Alumni Center serves as an excellent venue for the event. And we'd encourage all those that are interested in the pig industry to be there that day.
Mike, you had talked a lot about what kind of people you're expecting to attend this event, whether it's professionals, researchers, etc. Can you tell me what kind of conversations you're expecting to take place?
Well, that's obviously one of the main reasons that people like coming to an event like this is that they get to see a lot of their colleagues and friends that they don't often get a chance to visit with. And so the hallway talk and the meetings before and after the meeting is always the most exciting part. The main topics I would expect to be hearing this year is obviously people have made some money there during the last year in the swine industry, which was very good after a couple of years of some pretty heavy losses. And so there'll be some discussion about what kind of expansion's going on. Pork prices are starting to trend down going into fall right now, and so what's going to happen with the prices and the markets over the winter. A lot of discussion, as I mentioned earlier, about soybean meal and just what people are doing with soy, what's going on with grain sorghum, with the milo market in Kansas being very favorable to feeding milo instead of corn. We obviously do that a lot here in Kansas, but it's even been very enticing for some of our colleagues in other states, in Oklahoma, Texas, and even pulling that milo outside of the state of Kansas because of the lower price relative to corn currently. You know, as we get outside of the feeding side, the disease situation, going into the fall of the year, we always see an increase in respiratory disease, and the PRRS virus always seems to kick up. And so that's always a conversation is what's going on with that? Are people seeing any breaks in their sow farms, or are there any problems that they should be thinking about moving forward? And again, you know, getting into that sanitation, what have people learned about trying to keep some of these pathogens out of their farm? And is there something new that they can take home and apply in their business?
Mike, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you very much.
Again, that was K-State Extension Swine Specialist Mike Tokach as he discussed the upcoming 2025 KSU Swine Day, which is taking place in Manhattan, Kansas at the KSU Alumni Center on November 20th. If you are interested in learning more about this event or registering, be sure to check out ksuswine.org. Again, that is ksuswine.org. I will be sure to link this in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll have more for you up ahead on Agriculture Today.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. Kansas State University conducts horticulture-related research at several locations across the state, including the K-State Horticulture Research and Extension Center in Olathe. Director of the center, Cary Rivard, says that current research is focused on grafted tomato plants, agrivoltaics, and high tunnels.
You know, because Kansas has just very erratic weather, it's very difficult to grow vegetables here. And so one of the things that our growers have figured out real quickly is by utilizing these very primitive greenhouses, or what we call high tunnels, we can produce better crops more effectively, more consistently on a year-to-year basis. We do a lot of work in tunnels. We used to do a lot of systems work comparing open field to high tunnel production, but now we're working more within the tunnel, looking at soil health factors, economics, production practices, and we've done a lot of collaborative work with Drs. Pliaconi, Boular, and Jenkins, looking at how growing in the tunnels affects nutritional quality, shelf life, and food safety. Another big topic in our lab has also been looking at the use of grafted tomato plants. And we've been able to do a tremendous amount of research in this area. I don't know how many graduate students we've had work on this, but we've done all types of things from how to grow better grafted plants to looking at the rootstocks. We've done collaborative work looking at rootstock microbe interactions with the plant pathology department, and a lot of work with the K-State Olathe team looking at the nutritional quality and the shelf life. After we graft tomatoes, they increase the yield. How does that affect nutritional quality? In the last 5 years or so, we've really been doing less actual research with grafting and more extensions. One of the things that became very clear quickly is that there was nobody in the area producing grafted plants, and we did train some nurseries, but didn't work out very well. So at some point, we actually just started producing grafted plants for farmers in the region. I think this year we did about 15,000 plants. Last year was about 14,000. So we've been above 10,000 plants per year for a number of years now. And, one of the things that's fun about that is we've done a lot of on-farm research in the past. So we know that each grafted plant that we provide for a grower in Kansas is going to add about 11 pounds of fruit per plant by using these vigorous rootstocks that increase yield. So based on our rough estimations, based on our data, we've helped increase almost 1 million pounds of local tomatoes since 2016 as a result of that program. And the last research area that I wanted to point out was really new for us as of last year. We've got a couple different grants to help support this work, and that's really looking to understand how agrivoltaics could be utilized for growing specialty crops in Kansas. For those of you who don't know, agrivoltaics is basically the idea of growing crops around solar panels. There's been a lot of interest both from the energy producing companies as well as our farmers, as well as policymakers and other influencers in the state that are really interested in identifying if we can utilize these systems. And one of the nice things for us is because we have these great collaborators over at Olathe in the post-harvest physiology lab, I can look at the yield, Elaney looks at the nutritional quality, Manreet looks at the food safety factors, and then we can pull that all together for an interdisciplinary approach. The other thing that we've been doing in addition to growing crops in and around these solar panels is we're also just adding more solar to our farm and our farm function. Our farm is 100% carbon free in our irrigation system, and that's not just for our vegetables, but our turf as well. We've been putting a lot of investments into making our irrigation system solar powered in the last 5 years. We also have a new project with the SARE program, developing a solar-powered produce cooler that's going to start this fall. And then last but not least, I did just want to talk for a minute about our extension programs. One of the main programs here is called Growing Growers, and this is basically a beginning farmer program. This is actually our 21st year of Growing Growers. And for a very long time, it was really just based around the Kansas City area. And basically, we locate apprentices on farms so they can learn directly from commercial farmers. And then we would do sort of like a workshop series at the same time for those apprentices. In the last 5 years, we've changed it to an online format. So we have an online course that you can enroll in through our website. And then our apprentices can take that course. And the nice thing about that is we've been able to expand throughout Kansas and now also into Missouri through the help of a USDA grant. So we're excited about all the work that's happening with Growing Growers these days.
That's Cary Rivard, Director of the K-State Horticulture Research and Extension Center in Olathe. The August K-State Garden Hour highlights a variety of research projects being conducted by Kansas State University. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.